So the first thing he said about council houses is that he will do that through the budget that's already been allocated for so-called affordable housing. As people may know, what the government has called affordable housing, many governments, not just this one, is not really affordable for people on low incomes, and he wants to use that money. There's 39 billion allocated in the existing spending settlement for council house building. But if he wants to do more than that, then he will have to borrow, and it is appropriate when building housing to borrow for it, because there is a revenue stream, rental income that you get in the future, which can pay off the loan. That's how all of us buy our own homes with mortgages, how builders do it as well.
That we expect to be our next Prime Minister in just a couple of weeks' time has indicated that he is more likely to raise taxes on wealth than on work. Andy Burnham says there is room for movement on Labour's general election manifesto, in which Keir Starmer pledged not to raise income tax, personal national insurance contributions or VAT.
There is some room within that manifesto for movement on tax. So if you take business rates, for instance, I believe there is a case for higher business rates on warehouses and the major developments we see on the outskirts of our cities, so that we can cut business rates for pubs, and I've proposed a 20% cut, and lift some high street businesses out of business rates altogether. Overall, people can be certain of me, of one thing of me. Read some of the commentary. I am not indisciplined when it comes to the public finances.
Well, we can speak to Micheal Jacobs, former Treasury advisor to Gordon Brown. Michael, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to speak to you. How much wiggle room can you identify in Labour's manifesto?
I think there's probably about 20 to 25 billion pounds of tax rises that Andy Burnham could look at. I don't think he will, but which would not break the manifesto promise not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT, as you've said. So he's identified one in that interview, which was you could adjust the business rates paid by out-of-town online shopping warehouses compared to high streets. There's also a tax rise which where streeting mooted, which is very widely approved of by economists and tax experts, which is to equalise the rate of tax paid on capital gains with that of income. It seems a bit unfair and distortionary in economic terms that people who get their income from wealth pay lower rates of tax than people who get their income, like you and me, I suspect, and most of your listeners, from work. That's also true of rental income. If you're a landlord, you pay lower tax on that. So there is quite a lot of wiggle room. I don't think he'll use it all. I don't think Andy Burnham thinks that tax rises are a good idea in principle. We're already pretty highly taxed by historical standards. But if he does want to raise public expenditure to deal with the many problems that we can all identify, he does have some options, I think.
Is there anywhere else from where he could find money? Can he go to sectors or industries or, I suppose, consider, for example, I'm thinking of the digital services tax as an example, which I think raises around £1 billion a year at the moment. This is the tax on big tech companies. Is that something he should consider increasing, even if it might incur the wrath of Donald Trump?
Well, this is the problem, which is that on the digital services tax, which is a tax that all European countries have adopted in one form or another, on the big digital giants who are making enormous profits, as we know, it's a good idea in principle to tax those companies if you've got to tax somebody. But Donald Trump has said that anyone who taxes American companies will have retaliatory tariffs or other things. And Andy Burnham's got to be a bit wary of that. I don't think he will be quite as emollient towards Trump as Keir Starmer has been. I don't think there's any economic or certainly no political benefit in that, but he's going to be wary of that, I think, and there are other things he'd probably like to do first.
Yeah, fair enough. What about his ideas around devolution and the devolving of some spending and tax powers as well? What happens, Michael, if you strip Whitehall of that kind of grip on budgets that affect nations and regions? How do you prevent kind of local authorities from competing catastrophically in some cases against one another for investment, and actually consider that his good growth in every postcode must sort of a rising tide must carry all ships, rather than one region boosting ahead of the other?
So there is inevitably in any devolution settlement a risk that some devolved areas are more successful than others, whether through their own efforts or simply because they've got more attractive locations. And that is an inevitable consequence of decentralising power. You're not going to get identical policies in every place, and you're not going to get identical results. And that is, that's an issue. I think Andy Burnham will say, well, let's deal with that problem when we've got local authorities able to introduce better policies for economic growth in their areas. The main issue for fiscal devolution is not that local authorities should be able to levy their own taxes, but that they should take the revenue from the taxes that are already raised in their area. So one proposal, for example, is that income tax, instead of all being taken by the national state, by Whitehall effectively, the income tax that comes from people who live in Greater Manchester or Birmingham or London, whatever, should go to those areas and be able to be spent there. And that's what I think he means by fiscal devolution. It's that the resources that are generated in a place should be spent by that place and by its democratically elected representatives. But that wouldn't mean that you could raise income tax differently in Manchester or Birmingham or London from the rest of the country.
Yeah, I think this sort of competition between regions is a really interesting one for us to consider more on at a later stage. I want to ask about the fiscal rules, where Andy Burnham says he will be sticking by them. But he is also promising a massive kind of post-war level council house building programme. He's talked a lot about re-industrialisation. Fiscally, Michael, are those two positions compatible, or are we talking about borrowing here? Can he stick to the fiscal rules and build loads of council houses and re-industrialise parts of this country?
So the first thing he said about council houses is that he will do that through the budget that's already been allocated for so-called affordable housing. As people may know, what the government has called affordable housing, many governments, not just this one, is not really affordable for people on low incomes, and he wants to use that money. There's 39 billion allocated in the existing spending settlement for council house building. But if he wants to do more than that, then he will have to borrow, and it is appropriate when building housing to borrow for it, because there is a revenue stream, rental income that you get in the future, which can pay off the loan. That's how all of us buy our own homes with mortgages, how builders do it as well. And I think he can do that within the fiscal rules, because I think he should be doing it through public corporations, which would be able to borrow themselves, not government, but publicly owned corporations. That's how it was done after the war. We built new towns, vast numbers of homes, not by government borrowing, but by setting up special public corporations which could borrow off the government's balance sheet, using the rental income and the sale of land as their revenue source. And I think he could do that again. That would not affect the fiscal rules, and would enable very large sums of money, I think, to be borrowed from very willing investors, who wouldn't be the same people as would be trying to buy gilts. So I think there are ways he could do this within the fiscal rules.
It's interesting, like, the sort of tone that you're striking this morning is, I think, a bit more optimistic, perhaps, than some economists may be conveying about where Andy Burnham may have some room for manoeuvre. Let me put this to you on the politics of this. When it comes to Burnham saying that he will stick to Labour's national tax pledges, but if there is some devolution of tax raising powers or tax spending powers or some hypothecation and sort of ring fencing by region, he will be able to claim that he didn't raise taxes and local mayors may do that for him. He may just be outsourcing, he may be devolving the pain on that.
I think there's only one tax that will be actually raisable, as it were, at local level, and that's the one that Rachel Reeves has already announced, which is a tourism tax, an overnight stay tax, where I think local authorities will be able to choose whether or not they levy it. That's the only one that I think will be available for local authorities to raise and spend themselves. As I say, the rest of it, I think, is just taking their share of existing taxes set at national level.
Really interesting. Michael, thanks so much. Thanks for your time. That's Micheal Jacobs, former Treasury advisor to Gordon Brown. Lots there to consider. I think this competition between regions, do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing? If your next door neighbour's offering a more attractive offer to a tech company, an AI startup or whatever, how does that make you feel in your particular area? The ring fencing of taxes within regions, tax raised there should be spent there, and also this political point, how much of this is localised, allowing Burnham off the hook when it comes to sticking to the manifesto commitment, where on a local level it may feel like the council's absolutely hammering you.